Excellent. All right, thanks very much, everyone. So from the last opportunity we had to catch up, obviously the President of the United States, as he annually does, attached to every UN General Assembly week, hosted a reception. It was an opportunity to have a brief interaction, but for the most part, leaders catching up and with foreign ministers. This morning, as you will have seen, I've had a number of bilateral conversations. The first was with the lead of the Gavi Alliance, a vaccine alliance, which New Zealand had played a key role in making sure that we had early contributions. He requested to have that meeting and really struck me that first and foremost wanted to thank New Zealand for its support, but also have conversation around how do we just make sure that we don't lose any of the global momentum around making sure that children in particular are vaccinated and well protected against infectious diseases. I met with the President of Chile as well this morning. Some months ago when he was first elected, he reached out for a conversation and asked then if it would be possible to meet face to face when we had the opportunity, and so we followed through on that today. Had a fruitful discussion on issues that we've both found relevant in our early parts of our term, including CPTPP. As yet, there's a bit of work yet for Chile to do on that, and so just encouraging and sharing some of our experiences there. I also had the opportunity to join with the partners of the Blue Pacific to launch globally alongside other members of the Pacific, the Blue Pacific Strategy, which was of course a core part of the PIF meeting. I had a meeting with the UN Secretary General, covering of course the topics that you would expect. Ukraine, the position of our part of the region on that conflict, and also challenges facing the Pacific, including climate change. Casting forward, sorry, lost my train of thought. It's better than a moth. Casting forward, we are hosting this evening alongside the Prime Minister of Fiji, a gathering of Pacific Island leaders as well. Tomorrow, national statement.
Did you speak to Joe Biden at all yesterday?
Yeah, I did, as will have every leader who joined the reception and had a moment to meet the President and with Jill Biden. Keeping in mind, of course, I had a brief interaction with him at Her Late Majesty's funeral, the reception prior to the funeral as well. A very brief exchange where he just acknowledged just what the relationship New Zealand and the United States have and the importance of the relationship.
Prime Minister, is it time to expel the Russian ambassador from New Zealand?
As you'll know, amongst all of the options for our response, our strong response to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, we've always had a range of options on the table. Expelling the Russian ambassador has always been one of those options. We, like most of our like-minded partners, have not exercised that option. And that is because actually of all of the things we could do, that is one of the least meaningful in this situation. In fact, as the Foreign Minister has said, it's always been on the table, always been under active consideration. But having met just yesterday with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, I really am firming up the view that in their mind the most important thing we could be doing first and foremost, sanctions, and also supporting them as we have in the ongoing fight within Ukraine.
If not now though, when?
Oh, again, here the question has always been for us, what is the most meaningful thing we can do to bring an end to this war? And so there, Ukraine has never asked us to expel the ambassador. And so surely, for those who are at the front line, it is meaningful to us to respond to what they are pointing to. And keep in mind, of course, we've always said we want dialogue and diplomacy to end this war. You lessen your opportunities to do that when you don't have those representatives.
It's symbolic though, isn't it? It's sending a message to Russia that this is entirely unacceptable. We're not even going to talk to you.
Sanctions send the strongest message. You know, we as politicians have all been banned for travelling to Russia because of our sanctions, not because of diplomatic expulsions.
You spoke to the Secretary General about punishment for Russia for its actions. Is that right? In the reader?
No.
What did you discuss about sort of what could be done about Russia? There are calls for it from Ukrainian MPs to kick it out of the organisation altogether. And then realistically, what is the UN able to do in light of this recent escalation?
Our conversation was very much in those more general terms. How do we continue to make sure that we have that international community in its full force across regions? You know, not just Europe, but of course across Asia, Pacific, Latin America, the Caribbean, so that it's very clear that the international community stands united on this clear breach of the international rules and order. The second question is, how do you then make sure that Russia feels the full force? Sanctions remain the best option there. Now, of course, the UN is usually the body by which we operate with our sanctions. But even in lieu of that, you've still seen the international community act. New Zealand's ask, though, is we need reform of the UN. It's simply not good enough that we've had to act bilaterally. We've had to act on our own to make sure that we're seeing those consequences for Russia because of the veto and the failure of the Security Council.
But if they were expelled from the UN altogether, then without them, wouldn't you have sort of more of an ability to act against it in a way?
Oh, look, I see the point that you're making, but on the flip side, I mean, here, of course, is also a chance to make sure that Russia is facing the perspective, the views, and the strong condemnation of the international community. You know, almost in many ways, walking away from that condemnation is the easier option. They need to face and front up to the international community.
And what we've seen happen this week is exactly what sort of a lot of the developing nations were really worried about, that Ukraine and Russia would overshadow everything, and they've got their own, obviously, crises. Do you see that as how that has played out, that sort of other crises aren't getting the attention that they need?
Quite the contrary. In my mind, yes, of course. Ukraine is on everyone's mind because we are seeing an escalation in the language and potentially an escalation of the conflict that could affect all of us. At the same time, the majority of my day-to-day has been spent talking with other leaders about the crisis of climate change and the impact on small island nations. So from my perspective, it's not a matter of one issue dominating. It's a matter now that we have multiple crises we're dealing with as an international community.
Prime Minister, did you see Russia at the dinner last night?
At the POTUS event? No, I did not.
Do you know if they were invited?
I could not tell you. To be fair, it was a quite significant event. People were in multiple rooms as well.
You seem pretty popular down there on the UN floor. People were coming over to you, handshaking you and hugging you. What would you do if a member of the Russian Federation came over to you? Would you shake their hand?
Do you know, and I would, if that occasion ever arose, I would share directly exactly what I'm saying to you now, that their war is illegal, that it is immoral, that it is taking the lives of civilians. Russia needs to hear that from every corner of the international community.
So no pleasantries at all, just straight into it?
No, straight into it.
People at home might be feeling quite anxious at the moment with this talk of nuclear war and the like. Should they be fearful? Are you fearful?
I will always be a believer in the power of diplomacy and dialogue. And, you know, I can only reflect the sense of responsibility that I feel as a leader to protect and care for the people who have put me in this privileged position. And I hope that the Russian president feels that same sense of duty and care for his own people.
Zelensky yesterday called for a special war tribunal to punish Russia. Is that something that you would support?
There's a number of different conversations occurring at the moment, a register of losses, how Ukraine can be supported with compensation for their rebuild and seek restitution. And then, of course, there's the International Criminal Court work as well. From our perspective, we want to be part of all of those conversations. Our view is that there must be accountability. The question is only in what form that takes.
He also called Russia a terrorist state. Do you agree with that?
Everything they are doing right now is illegal. It is immoral. It is taking people's lives. You can put whatever label you want on it, but we are very clear what is... Yeah, and again, whatever label you use, it is wrong, it needs to end. And we take a very simple view.
Would you use that label?
There's many labels that I wouldn't necessarily disagree with, but the point is these are all words. What we need is action. We need the war to end.
So is that
At
a
what
label
point,
you
and what...
disagree with, though?
No, but at what...
It was Zelensky's speech, and let it stand. He's the one that's currently in the middle of this war. For me, it's not about the words, it's about the action.
Well, at what point, though, like, Putin is threatening to drop nuclear bombs? Is he a terrorist?
And here, this is where I feel like, whether or not we've had questions of genocide, terrorism, it is illegal. You can use whatever language you want. It is illegal, it is immoral, it is wrong, it needs to end. Everyone can discuss whatever labels they want to put on it, but for me it's very clear cut.
For compensation, are they feasible? Do you think that they could, and if they were, would you back them?
Yeah, no, I think it's too premature to make any calls on some of the proposals that are coming forward, but you can understand why Ukraine is asking the question when they are facing a multi-billion-dollar rebuild, asking the question of, well, who is accountable for this? So I do think it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's only just begun, and New Zealand will be at the table, I hope, for those discussions.
There was a fiery Security Council meeting this morning,
Yeah.
and reports are only just coming out.
Yeah.
Do you fall on heads of the rail on all sides? There is a risk here that this conflict, and obviously Russia's culpable for it, but it does sort of fall into that classic US-Russia tension, and perhaps it's inflamed by the tension between those two.
Yeah. Do you know, I think the overwhelming view of everyone on this floor was probably in some ways captured by those very early comments that were made by President Zelensky. Ukraine wants peace, the world wants peace. And that is true. Actually, regardless of whether or not you are a nation state that took a clear position on the war in Ukraine or not, I think that is the one thing that everyone in this building agrees on. So the question then is, how do we get there?
Just on Chile. Oh yeah.
Can I ask one more? White House administration has done a backgrounder where he sort of said he's basically calling the bluff back of Putin. He says there's absolutely nothing to those remarks. It's the same rhetoric they've heard before. Do you share the US's perspective that this was just empty rhetoric, or it was an appeal to a domestic audience from Putin?
Putting aside with the United States view, it's not for me to comment on their perspective. Simply our view would be
Do you think he's calling?
Yeah, again, there are those who will have different sources of information that they'll base their own judgments on. Our perspective is quite a simple one. Whether it's words or actions, the threat of escalation or indeed the use of nuclear weapons is wrong. Whether it's words or action, neither is okay. We have been fighting as a nation for a long time to remove nuclear weapons in totality, so that we don't even have the threat hanging over people that these could be used.
Chile?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Why Chile?
So as I said, I had a bilateral with the new Chilean president over the phone some months ago, and he asked at that point if we could, at the next opportunity, if we were at a meeting, meet. This was the first one. The next, of course, would have been APEC, but given it was the first, that we took that opportunity up.
Not just because he's young and left?
No. No, and in fact you'll see that I've met with a number of leaders that have not been, and the Chilean president visited in 2018. He was older and of a different party.
What was I going? Oh yeah. Just looking ahead to your speech at the UN, what's the message that you're looking to send?
Nothing in that speech tomorrow will surprise you. The same priorities that New Zealand has had for a number of years are as relevant now as they've always been, and that includes issues like the use of nuclear weapons. And so, I hope that I'll capture just the sentiment that New Zealanders will want shared here, and that is that we have a responsibility as leaders, a duty of care, to keep our people safe and to keep not only our backyards, but the international environment we live in as peaceful as possible.
And in the past, you've been quite critical of the UN. In the speech to the Lowy Institute, you made some very critical comments to the way that it operated around the Security Council. Can we expect you to take aim at them, or
I'll be consistent, but I think the point here is, that criticism is not angled at, for instance, the likes of the Secretary General. He, at the end of the day, is only able to preside over the rules that members support. It's actually for members to make the changes, and those who have had a national interest have protected their national interest. by retaining the veto. And in our view, that needs to end.
Have you done any sort of rewriting in light of the escalation?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I only wrote it 9 days ago anyway, so but yes, I always try and make sure that it reflects what's occurring before us in this international meeting.
Obviously,
Right.
a very
Last one, Thomas.
disappointing result from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty this year.
None of the nuclear treaties roll off the tongue. Yeah.
No. Can New Zealand do anything to restart or re-elevate that as an issue?
Yeah, and you know, whether or not it's a comprehensive ban on testing that we've always supported, or non-proliferation, or indeed prohibition. New Zealand has been active on all three and will continue to do so. In my mind, it seems to have been a period in the past where there's been what's felt like an international hiatus on furthering this work. Now more than ever, it needs to be at the top of the agenda. We'll certainly do our best to support that. New Zealand is known for being utterly consistent on nuclear issues. Not least, of course, for the fact that we've long held a very clear position on nuclear weapons and nuclear testing. So I think we're seen as a consistent and trusted country on these issues, but we need to build global alliances. New Zealand will never achieve it on its own. Last week.
Sure. Who was that? No. Who was the best dressed at the POTUS party?
Oh my goodness. It probably won't surprise you that this was not top of my mind. So I was not paying attention. Yeah.
No one that sticks in your mind?
No, I was absolutely not paying attention. But yeah, there were a lot of suits.